Yay, we're past the halfway point for sure. And we're on our way to getting you guys launched and out there. It's time to start thinking about social media. And you can't do that too soon. Okay. This is one of those things where you really should have pre-launch going on.
That's a really good idea. That's true. You can never prime the pumps too early with social media because it's an ongoing process, but the later you start, the longer it'll be before you have followers and develop that audience.
So, and you might have a follower base, but you may not have enough of a follower base in the topic that you want to discuss. So we had a great design following base. It wasn't gigantic or anything like that, but it was, it was good enough. And we had a lot of people who knew us and who had followed us over probably the 2 years prior to us starting our podcast. And so, it wasn't, but about 4 months before we started the podcast, I started a specific campaign to tweet and post topics related to our podcast topic, which in this case is 3D printing. So I started expanding my groups and going out there and messaging people and posting in groups and getting their attention and getting them to follow me back. And so it was more of a conversation going on about it, not any kind of promotional stuff at all. So I was making friends and followers, so that when the time came, they would be interested to hear that the podcast launched. And it worked. That's exactly how I did it.
It did. In fact, you really killed it on Twitter, I think, was one of the biggest platforms that we were building a meaningful follower base on first, right? And then also LinkedIn, you're also a master at.
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably where we get our most guests for interviews from, but it's also where we get a lot of shares of our podcast, of the posts from our podcast, not the actual podcast themselves. And on Twitter, we get a lot of retweets on whenever our episodes go live on whatever the topics are. So that's really where we sort of have, it's like episode announcements happen more on Twitter and Facebook, depending on who's following which. We have a very small Facebook following, but they comment a lot. They're very active. And then LinkedIn is really where it's more business related. And so some topics resonate and some don't. But whatever happens, there's enough of a presence there that we have no trouble getting guests straight through LinkedIn by cold messaging. So that's kind of how it works. So you want to start thinking about some conceptually those social media for your particular purpose. And this is something to think about. So we had a decision. We could have started all over again with social media and started up a whole new profile related to 3D printing. So that is a strategy for me personally, because I handle all the social media. That was really overwhelming. The idea of having 2 sets of accounts in every social media platform, or at least in a couple of social media platforms, was just too much to take on. But a lot of people do it. So, and we do it now, but we do it because we have a team now. So it's a little bit different. But we have 3D Start Point. So it's at 3D Start Point is, and we also have at Design. So we have both.
Notice that neither one of those is the name of our podcast.
Neither one is WTFFF. Yeah, we don't have them named as our podcast, because if you did that and then everything you posted was WTFFF, it would be completely sounding like a commercial and no one would ever follow you. So we try to make them both valuable. So what happens in that double social media strategy is that broadcasts messaging that an episode aired or anything like that happens in 3D Start Point, and it gets reshared by Has Design. So it's kind of that, or Has Design gets tagged because we're in the episode. So for my Inc column, it kind of works the same way. Inc puts out the message and then and tags at Has Design, which is me, and then I repost it. So it's kind of that same strategy, is that the publication is Inc, the publication is 3D Start Point. So when you get up big enough, that's a strategy. But at the beginning, if you don't want to do that, that's totally understandable. Just know that when the time comes and you want to do it, you have to start all over building an audience. So you can migrate some will come with you. Naturally, they'll do it.
Yeah, you can invite everybody on your existing platforms to, hey, if you want to get all the specific stuff regarding my podcast or my new venture, whatever it may be, you definitely solicit them and invite them.
Or you can do
it.
a promotion and say, hey, if you follow us, we're going to do a giveaway. So if you also follow us here, you'll see the giveaway announcement. So you can do some things like that to do that. But at the get-go, when you're setting it up, these are some things that that you need to do. You need to incorporate the name of your podcast and a link to it. I mean, obviously you don't have a link today, so you want to plan it in right now. You want to have a link to your podcast. You want to make it an active link. So ours says WTFFF podcast host, and it has the link on there. So our profile says we're podcast hosts, and then it's also coming through as a link so that they can subscribe directly. Now, we don't send them to iTunes. We send them to 3D Start Point to subscribe.
Sure.
Now we do, but in the beginning, we just sent them straight to iTunes. So that's a strategy and a play that you can make a decision on. I recommend early on sending them to iTunes because it's got a broader reach, even though Stitcher does as well. Which Stitcher is the Android version of iTunes. I strongly recommend hitting iTunes. It's a bigger place for podcast people searching for podcasts. So go there initially, because being a part of the iTunes library is kind of nice and nice to have. I mean, gosh, hey, I'm on iTunes. That sounds pretty darn good, right?
It definitely gives an air of credibility. Yeah. And even if people are, prefer to listen on Stitcher, it doesn't matter. iTunes they invented the podcast, and it makes a little more sense if you're going to promote something, to promote iTunes first.
Yeah. So you just want to find ways to do that. In our case, we hashtag it in Twitter. We do the same in Instagram. Instagram doesn't let you have links really. There's just like one. So we just do 3D Start Point there because there's just one. It's easier. Actually, we do at Has Design. We do Has Design in one and 3D Start Point in the other. So anyway, you want to think about how that is. Then you want to establish a Facebook page. And this is really an important thing that you really want to do.
Business-like page, right?
Yep, it's a business-like page, not a group initially, because you don't have enough of an audience for a group. You want to just start with a business page. This is a thing where you don't want to annoy all of your friends with your constant posts about your podcast. But there are some of your friends who are interested in the same thing you are. So initially, you just invite them to like the page. And because we post 5 times a week, that's a lot. I typically only share 1 post per week into my own feed so that it's not annoying. And I usually share the one that is the most of general interest to, non 3D printers. It might be My Business Monday, or it might be just, fun, inspirational, something about art on Fridays. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here. But anyway, so you try not to post into it. So if you're posting in your page and they're following the page, they're going to get the information, and then you reshare only the things that you think will interest your general friends and not annoy them. So that's a strategy by which to do that. That page, you want to set it up like it really is that you're the host, but the header is about the podcast or about, what your message is, your why and your information. You want to fill out the whole about, and you really want to make that almost like a mini website. Think about it that way. There's not a lot of information you fill out in there. It's pretty small and short. But you want to add it in.
But it's a landing page.
It's
really,
a landing page, yep.
It's a place you can go to get the basic information, and you can have links out and all sorts of things, right?
Right, exactly. And it's a great place because a lot of times we find that people don't share from our blog posts as much as they share from our social media profiles already. So they just reshare. It's a lot easier. And it's just a lot faster. So, and most people do that mobily because they're listening to the podcast mobily, or they go, oh yeah, there's a new podcast today. They saw it on Twitter, and then they click through and they automatically listen on their player. So it's just it's a lot faster and easier way for them to do that. A couple of things to remember about it is that make sure that don't use your icon as your picture. There's a tiny little picture, and then there's usually a broader header. You can put things like your icon or your information about your podcast, or reference to your podcast in the bigger header, but that image should be you. You're the host. This is about you. And so you want to keep that picture of you. People don't love to follow a site that has an icon in the place of the little tiny square. They don't like to follow it. They think it's a company. And why do I want to follow a company? They're just going to send me commercials.
That's true. You know, you're a podcast host. A person is talking on the podcast. The company is not. And they get to know and like you, and they want to know that this social media is coming from you.
Yeah, you know, we don't put we don't have any actually WTFFF references throughout our social media at all.
I don't think so.
They show up on the icons and the things we share, but they're not right on our page at all. I mean, there are word references to it, text references to it, but there is not any icon on there. And we do that on purpose because we do not want it to feel like it is a commercial, that they are connecting with us as hosts, and that's the important part. Now, 3D Start Point is different. So when we separate them out, that's the commercial broadcast that's repurposed from a company page. So we just had in that, but the hosts are resharing it. So that's a strategy if you want to take the complication of doing separation.
Well, plus we decided that we're tagging @HasDesign, which is our first primary social media account, in all of the @3D Start Point posts, right? So that everybody who's connected with us will see these.
We'll see both, right? Yeah. Exactly. So, you know, just thinking about that strategically. Now, there may be a really good reason why you want a separated page, and that may be if your podcast is not necessarily about your core business that you are already heavy in social media on, and then you want to make it a reshare and just occasional redo, and you really want to build up a separate. That's especially if you want to do what we've done, which is spin it off and have it be its own entity. So, you know, you really may want to start that from the very beginning, because once you get those followers that are focused on that, it's hard to shift them from one to the other. So this is just a conceptual thinking about it, and just started thinking about how to reincorporate, make sure your heading is reflected of your sort of new message that you're going after. And so it, you know, they all start to work together. And so really dive in. Go look at your social media profiles and say, here's what I want to change. Here's what I can change now before I have a link. And here's what I'm going to change in the future. And make some notes to yourself and start thinking about what this is going to look like, so that you can execute it really quickly once you have all your links in place at the end of the month.
Now, Tracy, how do you handle all of our social media?
Oh my gosh. You know, I probably should, you know what? I will put out our crazy, now it's old because we haven't updated it. We're just about to have a meeting to update that in the next couple of weeks, but I'll give you my old one from last year. I actually have a whole chart I use, and I'm happy to share it with you. I call it my do-it-yourself DIY chart. Okay. And this is just a guidelines, and it's also good guidelines to give to somebody if you are going to, if you're going to give it to a virtual assistant or a VA or something like that. So you have some kind of, and I'm going to try to pull it up here so I'm actually accurate on what we do. And it's kind of a thing where I developed it, and it says when we post, when we should post, how often should we post. We've even dialed in since then and gotten a little better about getting to the times a day to post, but that's you know, more advanced concepts, and not everyone is there. And that's, you know, mainly because we've been doing this a long time that we've gotten to that.
Sure. But I mean, for instance, look, I understand Facebook really well because I use Facebook personally. And of all of our social media platforms, that's the one I probably use the most for our podcast and business, you know, podcast communication with listeners. So people post something and I'll reply to them quickly. I get how to do that. I know how to do it from my phone or my computer. Twitter confounds me a little bit with some of its rules and things. I know it's easy for you, but you always say, oh, just tweet it. I'm like, all right, what do you want to do? Sing a song? I can do that. You know, but I don't know if I can, you know, this. So aren't there some tools that you use to help make it a little easier to manage?
So let me just go over quickly what, so I have goals. So I said, okay, I have strategic business goals. I want to have so many new clients. I want to get paid engagements. I want to sell some books. Like, these are goals. And so I put them in here. We actually didn't meet any of those goals because we changed our whole plan once the podcast started. But
well, so then I would say we changed the plan.
We changed the plan, but we never updated
to achieve the goal.
Yeah, we didn't want to anymore. But you know, but I sort of look at it and I say, okay, here's where I'm starting. Here's my stats. Okay, I have so many followers and connections. I want to increase that so that I have a higher percentage of engagement or whatever I might want to have. And so I have plans for that. So then below that, I put all the social media profiles. So I have all of the social media profiles, all of the followers base, and all of our engagement. Engagement means who's connecting with you and then discussing with you. So who's acting on it, resharing it, doing that kind of thing. And you can get a lot of this information straight off of the statistics and analytics from your social media profile. There are other outside tools to use, but to be honest with you, I don't really use them anymore. Because they just get too complicated and way beyond what I want to do. I just want to keep it simple and make sure I'm having active users. Then below that, I put in our high level keywords that I want to make sure get circulated and used. This is probably, there's like a dozen of them. I just keep them here as a reminder in case I forget, like, oh my gosh, I haven't used 3D print education in a really long time. I better start tweeting some things about that. So if I get stumped, these are the 12 topic areas I want to cover every month in some way, shape, or form to boost it. I don't necessarily use these keywords exactly or like hashtags. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. But the idea is I want to make sure I'm covering those words.
The subjects,
really. Yeah. So then I have our social media manager schedule. So we'll say social media, it says a schedule like YouTube. We want to do 3 videos per month. I have a manager for that. In this case, it was Jonathan at the time. Now it's Tom. And then I have contributions, 1 long video, 2 appetizer videos. That's what we call when you do a little short video for Facebook or for Instagram, you know, it's like 20, 30 seconds. And we post them directly into YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We do them all separate, even though they are housed in YouTube long-term. So we have our archive there.
Right.
And so we do that. And then the networking. So you have the channel, we have what our content is for the month, and then we go into the networking. So 2 times per week, somebody needs to add to the playlist, to comment on something, to subscribe to relevant channels. So it's just 2 times per week, somebody needs to do, you know, a 15-minute networking activity in that channel. And so we assign that out. And so then we do 5 times a week in Twitter, like that. So we have Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn. So we have a huge thing. And then we tried Reddit, and I hate Reddit, so I don't do it. But a lot of people do. They love it. I just couldn't stand it. And then we have our content sources. And this is kind of really, this is where podcasting revolutionized it for us. Because we were working so hard. We were blogging, we were podcasting, we were producing original images and original videos, we were sharing news and articles, we were gathering business cards and then connecting with them online. And then we had resources and vocabulary sort of and 3D print educational kind of. So we had to like all of these content, and it was like so much to keep a hold of. But to be honest with you, we rolled almost all of that up into podcasting. And this is where it simplified everything for us, because it creates the blog. You're forced to create original images. It happens in the process. You're talking about news and articles in possibly during your podcast. We do it once a week. We really kind of cover something in the news or something of interest that's been talked about. We always are defining vocabulary. So there's always things to tweet out in all of this content coming straight from the podcast for the week. So we only use now the podcast to keep us organized.
The podcast is the content generator.
Right. But we just pull all those pieces out of it.
Right. And it's not, I want to make sure, I mean, this is clear, even though I know we've said this a few times over the course of this program, is that the podcast is not the end.
Right.
It is really the means. It's the vehicle by which content is created. And some of that is audio content that is reaching people through the podcast. But that's almost, in my mind, in terms of the marketing power of a podcast for your business, for your initiative, whatever that may be, it is almost less important than all of the written content that comes as a result of the podcast. So Tracy, this whole thing is really a plan that you what do you call this document? Is it a plan?
What do I call it?
It
social media plan. And I do it, I did it once a year.
But what about any other tools for actually organizing your tweets or scheduling them out and things like that?
Yeah. So we use something called Buffer. And Buffer is paid. It's a paid tool, but I think it's like, I don't know, maybe it's $50 a month or something like that. But it's
not necessarily cheap,
I was thinking it's not cheap, but there are some that are cheaper, and I think you can use Buffer in a sort of lower level free mode if you don't have multiple logins and you don't do too many tweets in a month. Like,
we
it
have
limits you.
assistants that need to do it, so we need to give them a login.
So I think it got a little more complicated for us because of that. But I think there was other ways to use it. You certainly can try it. Other people use Meet Edgar. I didn't love it because there was some things I didn't like about it.
But what does Buffer do?
But basically, it's a scheduling system. So it's basically a place at which, for Twitter, it doesn't matter for that you post within Twitter, that you can broadcast into Twitter. So in other words, Buffer, we put our tweets into Buffer and we schedule them out, because Twitter doesn't have a scheduling feature. Facebook does. Like, you can go in and you can put a post and you can set it for 3 days from now, 3 months from now. It doesn't matter. Facebook lets you do that. Twitter does not. Instagram does not.
But the Buffer allows you to post both of those?
Buffer allows you to post to LinkedIn and to Twitter in a broadcast way. So in other words, you put it in Buffer, you leave it. You do them weeks ahead of time, months ahead of time, days ahead of time, whatever it is. I highly recommend doing it the Friday before the following week, so you get it done. So
you can, in one sitting, schedule a lot of your social media stuff for a period of time, because you know you're going to be on the road, or you know you got a lot of work coming up, or whatever it is you're doing.
Right.
That can go out for you. So you don't have to be babysitting all these social media accounts every day and getting it done.
Right.
Although I guess you need to respond sometimes when things come in.
Right. And you do have to respond. Yeah. I mean, you still have to network and you still have to respond and you still have to do that, but you can limit yourself to 15 minutes a day on all social media platforms or something like that. And that's kind of, I do it first thing in the morning and I do it at the end of the day. So I just do it twice a day, and I really only spend about 10, 15 minutes just double checking everything. And, you get broadcasts on your phone. Like, we know when somebody retweets us, and I can peek at it. And if it's really like somebody important or influential, then I'll respond back. If not, I ignore it until the end of the day, and then I address all of them.
Right.
But Buffer allows you to just schedule out your tweets and schedule out your posts. We do not broadcast into the LinkedIn groups, though. If you're going to share in a group, share directly. They will close you out of a lot of groups. They'll block you if you're broadcasting in. And so you can do it to your company page if you've got a company page on LinkedIn, and you can do it also to your direct profile. I actually don't use it anymore for LinkedIn beyond the company page. I don't use it to post into our personal LinkedIns anymore. Instead, I use the personal LinkedIn to share news and information only. But I use the Pulse to repost out topics.
What is the Pulse?
The Pulse is kind of like blog posting within LinkedIn.
Okay.
So, and they allow you to schedule that out. So you can leave them in draft. But the problem is that you don't actually get to schedule them. You leave them in draft. So you have to remember every day when you go in to do your networking on LinkedIn to send one out.
So you can I do like a week ahead of time.
Yeah.
And save them. You can't schedule them.
Right.
But then you don't have to spend a lot of time. It's just when you're doing your daily thing. Oh yeah, send it out.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So anyway, it just takes some time to set those up. But in there, I'm doing more of a blog post. So like, I actually copy the first couple of paragraphs of our blog post and we'll put it in there. And then say, for more information, see, this. Some of them, you can get even sophisticated enough to put podcast players in there. I don't do that, but that's okay. So anyway, so we keep, so this is how we do it. And Buffer allows you to put in something, excuse me, called Evergreen Tweets. And evergreen content is something that is going to be true today, tomorrow, and the next day. And what we want to do in that particular case is we want to repurpose them. So we recycle them and we continually reuse them to fill in the Twitter blanks. So if you want to tweet 5 times a day, one of those tweets might be the new podcast message, but 4 of them might be ones that are recycling around old podcasts or messages of something different. We also try to make it so that everything has you rotate between image, link, quote. You just kind of rotate between the different types of content. So there's always something with an image, something with a video, something with just a quote in there, something with a link, just a straight link. Because some people respond to the visuals and some people don't. And so you want to just have all of the mix of things where you might. So when we do a tweet about our podcast, we make all 5 different types. So if there was a video, we embed that video. If there was a link, we embed that link. If there was the header images, of course, the squares, we always use those. And so you just kind of use a mix of things of those different types, and then you make a tweet variation. So every single blog post, every single podcast episode has 5 different tweets that are made from it initially. And some of them we rotate and we keep them long term and we keep using them. And others of them we say, well, nobody responded to them. They didn't like that one. We just ignore that one and we don't keep it as evergreen at that point. So anyway, that's kind of how you do it. The buffer just is a really simple way to keep scheduling that and keep that out there for you. You can post into Pinterest from there if you're really heavy image based. We don't really use it that way either, but because I usually they're random images from around and not broadcast images for us. So anyway, those are the tools we use. We use a plan. We fix our profiles. We use the buffer. We post directly in Facebook. I was going to talk about that. There is a scheduling section in there. The reason you have to post in Facebook is because if you do not post directly in Facebook, they give it to a very, very tiny % of your followers. As it stands now, you can get between 13 to 26% of your following will see any given post. They do not share your posts 100% with your following. So if you have 100 likes on your page, only 13 of them will probably see any given post at any time, unless it starts getting reposted and shared and commented on, and then it will start dropping it into the feeds for the other people as well. So you can broaden up. And that's where you see something about when you look at the bottom of the statistics, it'll show you how many people have seen it, like
how much reach you have,
how much reach it has. And that reach is directly proportional with the fact that they're restricting it so that because we have so many people we're following at any given time, if we got every single post, it'd be like looking at the Twitter feed, which is just impossible. Mm-hmm. So they restrict that. The exception to that right now is because Facebook is working very, very hard to compete with YouTube. Anytime you post a video directly in Facebook, not a video link you've shared from YouTube, but a video you posted directly in Facebook, or a live stream that you've done from Facebook, which like Facebook and live stream they're owned by Facebook bought live stream. So live stream is owned by them. So when you have that in there, then they give it out 100% to your following. So all 100 people will see it because they are working hard to promote video as part of their platform. So that's an exception, and you can really get a lot of play by posting videos.
Cool.
So that's kind of my social media 101, like really condensed down.
And that's a lot to think about.
It's a lot to think about.
I would say, if you're doing this all yourself, and that's a lot to manage, right? I would suggest that you pick 1 or 2 social media platforms and really concentrate on them, ones that you can handle, and then expand it as you can, or once you start monetizing your podcast, or if you can allocate a budget for a virtual assistant or have a social media manager that can handle that for you. And that's what we did. We did it ourselves for a long time. Now we have a part-time employee who does this for us.
I still post every single day myself. Like there's always posts directly from me, but there's no reason for me to send out tweets that are about the podcast when somebody else can do that. It's not essential that I'm commenting on that. So I also do respond back to people who tweet us back and do things like that. Facebook, so I connect with them. So they're getting me anytime that's happening.
Right.